So it's graduation season, and I was actually just in Texas at a high school friend's wedding. Very, very beautiful out of Austin in the Hill Country. It was crazy just thinking, high school for me was, 20 years ago when I started. And, I remember, the graduation there and graduating in that and having the commencement speeches and everything. And I think mine was, I think, a very different experience in the topic we're going to talk about. But recently at Benedictine College, we had a lovely commencement speech by Harrison Butker. And by lovely, I mean I truly did not enjoy it. But wanted to get kind of the opinion of the group and what would they think. It's definitely been talked about a lot. So what's
boo?
Oh wow, just straight boos out
The
the
straight
gate.
boos,
I
which is what
loved
the
it.
crowd should have done. Ginny really loved it. She's
It
been
really
talking
opened
about
my
it nonstop.
eyes. It was great.
She now wants to get married and have children.
Now marriage and children is my only goal in life. That's all I want for myself. I'm going to quit my job.
And be a homemaker.
I'm going to be a homemaker.
Proud of you.
I'm open, guys. Anyone watching?
Please email us your applications.
Yeah. Let me know.
But how does someone like that, like what was Benedictine College objective when they were looking through the list of possible people to give the speech? Because everybody has, like, every graduation seems to have some type of keynote speaker, right?
Yeah.
Like beyond just the valedictorian and stuff. And I remember, like, at one of the graduations at Ohio State, it was, President Obama spoke, or I think Jerry Seinfeld was at Columbia, like, recently, I think. And then President Biden was at Morehouse this past weekend. So, like, I mean, certainly Benedictine College is a lot smaller, probably didn't have the draw of some of those other ones we just mentioned, but, like, what do you even think was the objective? Like, why?
Honestly, so it's in Atchison, Kansas, which is, like, on the border of, like, Kansas and Missouri, and I grew up in Missouri, so I know a lot of people who, like, went to that college, who taught at that college. Like, I'm pretty familiar with the college. It is very small. It's like 2,000 students, and it is super conservative, super Catholic. So obviously I don't know who any of their past speakers have been, but I think that that's probably their goal when they are selecting a speaker. I also think that it worked really well in their favor that they were able to pick someone who aligns with, like, their values, that also is on a team that is getting so much press and eyes on them right now. It didn't surprise me in the sense of, like, it made sense to me just knowing that background.
I think what you're saying also, I think it gets at something very unique to, like, the hyper conservative movement, is they are very good at, like, narrative shaping. Because I think something that I was seeing in response to this nonsense is, like, I think when there's, like, a hyper reaction on one side, the other side is like, what he was saying isn't that bad. Like, he was just saying blah, 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 blah. And so, like, what I was seeing a lot on, like, all the different, like, Harrison Butker posts, especially after the NFL released their statement, is a lot of people, like, being like, well, why does the NFL have to release a statement about this? Like, it wasn't, all he was doing is trying to say, like, appreciate your family. And I think even though obviously what he was saying, which was much more extreme than that, I think the, like, hyper reaction on personally, like, my end of, like, the political spectrum, like, ends up pulling people to, like, the like unproductive middle of, like, where people, I just think the conservative movement is really good at doing things like that. Is pulling things to their narrative side. And I think they are able to do that at, like, a national level, and they're able to do that, like, a hyper local level. Like, they're doing that a lot with, like book bans. Like, the way book bans are happening is not, like, this big, like, national thing. It's because the conservative movement is inserting literal individuals into, like, local governments and getting them to, like, put in, like, questions for, like, or what do you call it? Like, questioning certain books and having them, like, just pulled off the shelves temporarily, and then that creates, like, a national narrative. and gets people talking about things and pulls people to that side in a way that I think wouldn't happen otherwise.
Yeah, and I think it also highlights what happens, what conversation happens in the rooms that you're not in. You know, there is a kind of broader conversation, you know, maybe that is kind of generally accepted as mainstream, but, you know, people aren't in every room. You create echo chambers where you want them, whether it be on social media, the schools you go to, the clubs or societies that you're a part of. So, I mean, I was looking at some of the kind of, you know, commentary after the fact or what students were saying. And some of them were saying, yeah, like I think my dad would have been really proud to hear that because, you know, he's definitely kind of a man's man. Or, you know, I think he was saying a lot of things that, you know, really align with what, you know, I need to hear, which I think is interesting when you talk about a Latin mass or how the church has, you know, they weren't doing enough during COVID to go give the sacrament when people were sick, or in comparing that to, can't remember who he was talking about, but it was a priest that was lived in a leper community in Hawaii.
Yeah.
Or, you know, women need to be, you know, vocational, and their greatest achievement is, you know, being a homemaker, and men set the culture. I mean, these are all like tonalities and things that, one, I think it's just very interesting that at commencement speech, we're supposed to be kind of sharing your perspective, what you've learned, kind of a nice tidbit of congratulations on what you've accomplished thus far and what you're going to accomplish in the future. And even within the speech, there was never like a call to action or a inspiration of this is what you get to go forth and do and impact. Mm-hmm. It almost felt, I mean, now that I'm thinking out loud, very old school Catholic of, you know, be fearful of the wrath of God because you need to follow this straight and narrow path, and don't you contribute to the sins and the travesties that are happening in the world, and the acceptance of kind of, you know, this, you know, abominations of culture that exists, which I completely disagree with. Yeah. But I even found it interesting where the nuns that are associated with the college, I think it's I have it written down, it's Mount Saint Scholastica, who's I guess the nun group associated with Benedictine College. It's interesting when you say women's role is the vocation of building, you know, being a homemaker. Well, as nuns, you're spreading the good word, you're doing missionaries, but you don't. Yeah,
but you are not a homemaker.
You're not procreating. You're not a homemaker.
Yeah.
So it's interesting even there, like, well, I think we're doing some great work, and yeah, we're not aligned with these views and in how he was speaking.
Right.
So yeah, it's just just to circle back. I think it goes through. It's interesting to shine a light, and luckily, you know, someone recorded it, and now we see it. But just what kinds of conversations happen in the rooms that we have no idea that even exists. I mean, yeah. Who thought of Benedictine College really on a regular basis until this past week? Outside of the person that, you know, lives nearby.
It is true, though. It's been interesting from my perspective because when I saw it, it was not shocking to me at all. This was like very much like, yes, this makes sense. I know, like, a lot of people that go to this college. Like, I went to a small Catholic high school 40 minutes away from this college, and my entire high school was 200 students. So it was around like 50 students per class. Like, my class had 58 students. And a lot of these students go to this college. Like, a decent amount of them go to this college. So for me, these are the types of things like I was hearing, like, not necessarily like the people in my life were saying them, like that was not aligned with like how I was personally raised, but that's like the environment I was in. So for me, when I heard this speech, it was not shocking to me at all. I thought the most shocking part was the fact that he was just bashing the Catholic Church the entire time, because that's something that like I'm used to hearing, like the misogynistic comments or homophobic comments, but like someone bashing the Catholic Church the way he was bashing it, that's like what was shocking to me. And then it was interesting to see that for everyone else, like the other comments that I'm used to hearing is what was like so shocking, which is beautiful that was shocking to other people. I'm glad that it was because it should be, because it's insane, honestly. It is true though about like the echo chambers. It's like crazy.
Yeah, that is true because I went to Catholic school. I think we've established I went to Catholic middle school and high school, and the one thing that you were told not to do is to question the church. There was like sort of this you should always be open to asking questions about your faith, but in actual practice, that wasn't encouraged at all. So in a way, this speech was like pretty subversive in terms of being aimed towards Catholics. In terms of all of the bashing, there was a lot.
And that's the part that I think, that's the part that interests me the most, because I think that is indicative, or maybe like it suggests some kind of power behind this guy. Like, I don't think this guy wrote this speech by himself. I don't think this guy I'm sorry. I'm sure he's whatever. I don't know what he is. But like, there's no way he wrote this speech by himself.
No.
There are like,
chance.
this felt like a speech that like had very specific bullet points, that had very specific like criticisms that it wanted to get across. It had very specific objectives that it wanted to get across. Even like, I think probably like you said, there was this intention to make it a national story, especially like with the Taylor Swift stuff. But it felt like hyper directed at the Catholic Church, especially at a time right now when the Catholic Church is headed by somebody who, at least for Catholics, is much more progressive. Mm-hmm. And it felt like a targeted, move towards a leader who is more progressive.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I guess play out the politics of the why you would do that. I mean, this is kind of how we got to the kind of broader political landscape that we're in, right? Where you had a president that was black, liberal. You felt like, maybe the country was getting away from us. And a lot of that then became, the vocal minority feeling more emboldened to kind of have the counterweight to where the country was going, and kind of the environment and the things that were happening. And then that led to an environment where someone like a Trump or things at Charlottesville, or the insurrection, and just the emboldenedness of that all started with kind of that kind of small antithesis of I'm not going to shy away from those conversations. And you're like, oh, well, it's just some little person here. We're not really worried about that. But maybe that is, from where the Pope is and where the Catholic Church has started to open its aperture and be more welcoming of, abortion and LGBTQ folks, and not, writing that off as just complete sins and abominations, and still having kind of those, embracing the grays that exist. Maybe this is the start of maybe a trying to make Catholics great again movement. If it was, intended to be publicized or, made for virality content. Because it certainly is. I mean, I think if you watch the whole thing, right, like the sound bites that are there, or what's been kind of shared around, if you haven't watched the whole speech, like there's a lot more kind of problematic and content that's in there, but there's kind of like three main things that are talked about. It's the pride joke, and then the women should be homemakers. So maybe there is a lot of intent in terms of how it's being spread, or why it was written the way it was, and what's gone viral.
I would love to know if that was super intentional, or like the best like happy accident for them ever.
Wait, what was?
Like it going like viral, like it getting so much attention. Because this really happened like in the middle of nowhere.
They
Like,
must have known. I mean,
that's probably what they were hoping for, at least.
yeah, maybe they might not have been hoping for exactly this, but
Yeah.
I feel like they were hoping for some sort of response, some sort of public response. Yeah. I mean, this all kind of seems to follow this trend that I've been seeing like on social media of like these alpha male trad wife. I don't know if those are like the terms. I know about trad wives because that's like a big
Wait,
thing.
is that like that woman who like bakes shit and she's like very weirdly kind of like silent in her videos and like yeah, that shit's weird.
No, yeah, there's multiple
Wait,
on TikTok.
I think she's Mormon.
What is trad?
Trad means
Yeah.
traditional. So like it's this kind of like going back to traditional values. Like it sort of was in a way, I don't think it was started by Trump, but I think it was like reinforced by Trump with this like Make America Great Again. And then that to conservatives was like, oh, we need to go back to the values we had in the 1950s or the 1960s where the wives stayed at home and they cooked and they cleaned and they didn't work and the men worked and all of that. And it seems like that's the lifestyle that he has with his wife and his family and what he thinks should be the model for these college graduates at Benedictine College. I mean, he didn't just say he thinks that. He literally said, stay in your lane, which normally is not a positive.
Right.
Like, stay in your lane is like what bullies say in movies. Like, stay in your lane, man. You know, that's what the guy said to like Ralph Macchio in The Karate Kid. But that seems to be like the sentiment among these very young people, because they're not like in their 30s. Not that 30 is old, but like they haven't been married for a decade or more and have had children and are like, yes, this lifestyle works for us, this woman with these traditional roles and I as the man. Like these people are in their 20s. They've been married for like a couple of years and they just, you know, in all of their, you know, vast knowledge over the whatever months they've been together are like, yeah, this works. This totally works.
Yeah.
And, you know, it reminds me of Mad Men, which illustrates that it doesn't actually work. But yeah. Oh.
Cheers.
And cheers.
Ding.
Ding.
Ding. Someone
Sorry,
cheers,
Steven. Sorry, Steven. Sorry.
He picked his own seat.
But it is kind of weird because you just look at that and it's just like to a thunderous applause. And then, you know, you look at the other side of what's going on with college, right? Like you have valedictorians not allowed to speak or whole commencements being canceled and stuff. Yet you have this go and it's fine, gains virality. And it's just it's just the scale and breadth of which we're just having these conversation and differences highlighted in our society. It's breathtaking.
Something that I was thinking about when you were talking earlier is like, I think something that scares me is you're talking a little bit about the like political ebb and flow, especially in recent years, like the Obama years kind of leading into the Trump years. And then like the uprising years, like leading into like these hyper like anti-DEI, anti-woke, whatever kind of movements or whatever. And I feel like, I think the thing that scares me is like the political ebb and flow rarely goes past like a little bit left of center. like, but it always goes far, far right. And I think that has something to do with being like our country being like built in like white supremacy. And because even like the Obama years, like Obama was generally speaking barely left of center in a lot of ways. And in a lot of like policy respects, like Biden is maybe like, there's a couple policies that he might have that were a little bit left of Obama, but in a lot of respects, he's right of Obama. And like, but every single response to those movements is like hyper right. And the closest we got was during the uprisings when we were talking about like defunding the police, but like that had like the most extreme response out of everything. And that lasted like 2 months tops. And like, and so I feel like the ebb and flow of our country is like a little bit center and then hyper right, a tiny bit right of center and then hyper right. Oh, maybe we'll go a little bit more left than usual. No, we're gonna go like super right, and like that's scary for me, especially like as a person of color.
Yeah, I mean, when you say like super right, it to me, what that is just kind of like more people are dehumanized. Mm-hmm. Like a certain ideology is set in stone, and everyone who falls out of that doesn't deserve shit. Like, you know, and the thing is, like, I mean, I'm biased, but like people who are on the left are for the good of a lot of other people. Yeah. People who don't necessarily align with everything that they're aligned with, they still are like, yeah, they deserve stuff.
They're a human.
Yeah, they're another yeah. person, and they deserve like rights. They deserve like these certain human,
the bare minimum.
Yeah, the bare minimum. And with right, it's kind of just this very narrow view of things. So I mean, I think that's why, like, how much farther left can we go? Where I feel like conservatives and people who are right wing, like, there's almost no end to how far right they can become, because it just becomes more and more insular. It becomes more and more like, these are the things that I believe in, and anyone outside of that is against me. You know?
And I also think what is bumping up against that, what makes it really hard, is that how far left can we really go? Because like people on the right are going to go very far. Mm-hmm. But I also think that is a conversation with like the mainstream left, which is like, how far left are you willing to go? Which is not very left.
Yeah, I mean, we've been seeing that with Palestine.
Yeah.
And with a lot of other things.
So it's like you are having a conversation where you're like, okay, these fuckers are willing to go like really crazy, January 6th style. And like, you guys are like, if people say free Palestine, you get a little like fucking weird.
Yeah. I was just at a thing where somebody wrote free Palestine, and then some very, you know, a young man was just like, we're not doing that today, and wrote over it. And I was like, oh, that's how it is. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, along that line, and I will say part of this is not original thought, because it was this topic was on a podcast that I listened to as well, and they kind of mentioned that, you know, with the NFL putting out their release, it's very weird that they put out a release on this specifically, given, you know, all the other stances that they have and issues with domestic violence and other things within, you know, their own house, and how they dealt with Colin Kaepernick, who still doesn't have a job. But I think it's interesting, though, because, you know, he didn't do this it wasn't like he was at a press conference. He wasn't representing the NFL or the Kansas City Chiefs. Like, he was there on his own accord. But if someone were to ask him about this during a press conference, or is there going to be a wave of people all of a sudden, you know, drafting him on his fantasy team? I think his jersey sales are up right now. But then that'll be interesting to see how an entity like the NFL that has PR issues already and is very protective of the brand, how would they deal with that? Because, I mean, he hit the full gamut, right? It was questioning DEI, how leaders were doing, how COVID responses were happening, commenting on how pride is an abomination, and even mentioned that legislation passed where you can't say that Jews killed Jesus without going to jail. So like he hit the whole gamut and whatever. Like there wasn't a single left or right side. It was, I'm gonna touch everybody's sensitive subjects. And I'll be curious when then you have an entity like the NFL that has all these movements that says in racism and has homages to pride and focuses on its diversity, but still has its own issue. Then what'll happen? Or is that going to be a further flashpoint to drive more conversation? Is it going to whip further right or left? Kind of what you were saying, Tim. I think it'll be very interesting if someone wanted to be a really good but also really pointed reporter, like keep bringing up those questions during the NFL season to make him say something on the NFL's time. I'll be very curious, like,
do you think that'll happen?
I don't have a press pass, but I would.
Yeah. Someone's got to.
Yeah. No, that's inevitable. I feel like someone's gonna ask him something.
Yeah.
But I kind of feel like he wants that.
Yeah, but I'll be curious to see how that dance happens, because it was not he was definitely from a gray area shooting every which way, and I think there will be a lot of people that take offense, but also a lot of people that will want to stand up behind it, and I think it could be an interesting kind of flash point topic.
Yeah.
You know what's annoying though is that he touched on all these topics, but he didn't go into detail of like what the way that he wrote the speech, the way that the speech was written it was assuming that the audience already agreed with his thesis, right? Mm-hmm. Like, so he would say things about COVID and say things about XYZ and not go into detail about he felt. He was just like, yeah, you guys all agree, like as if it was fact. And so what I fear is if people do question him about it, he'll be like, well, what did I say? I didn't say, like he has there's enough gray area in his speech where he didn't like explicitly say like, oh, I think COVID is a hoax and I think that,
Yeah.
And where he can't get caught. And that also speaks to the fact that, or the likelihood that others helped him write his speech, because they did a really good job of staying away from those really strong kind of like statements. Yeah.
But it felt very right bias, right? Because it was talking about, being
100%.
pro-choice, but then, talked about the president that had all the COVID lockdowns while also talking about, Biden, performing the sign of the cross at pro-choice rallies, even though Trump was the president when COVID started.
But did he say Biden?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, he did say Biden. Because I was like, I feel like he didn't name anybody. Like,
he also,
and so it's very right-leaning.
Yeah.
But at the same time,
he covered a lot of it with religion also.
Yeah.
Oh,
like,
yeah. Which, yeah.
If I think if he does get questioned on anything, it's all going to boil down to like being a good Catholic.
Mm-hmm.
Because every single thing he was saying, he was laddering it back to like being a traditionally good Catholic. Like his complaints about COVID were all about how, like you said, people didn't have access to the sacraments. Like the things he was complaining about, even though they were things about like COVID, for example, like things that were outside of the church, his complaints stemmed from like things that are in the church. I don't know if that was like strategic or that's just where his mindset is, but everything was just, the whole entire speech was basically about being like a better, like more traditional Catholic.
But didn't talk about Trump walking across the street holding the Bible upside down or
Right.
selling $60 Bibles that have the Constitution inside of it.
Right.
So you admitted very easily things you've been like, if you want to be a true Catholic, like you probably should say you shouldn't be doing those things, performative Catholicism on top of that either. So
did he ever, I know he didn't mention him by name, did he ever like allude to Trump?
Mm-mm.
I don't remember.
No.
Yeah, I didn't think so. Because I think that would be his argument, is that I didn't say I supported him and I didn't say anything. Yeah. Like you said, it was written very like strategically, I think.
Yeah.
This is such a depressing conversation.
Let's have another drink.
It is. It's just so sad. Shout out to his mom, though. She sounds like a really accomplished person.
Yeah.
She does.
This is one situation where I'm not blaming the parents. I don't know about his dad, though, so.
Debatable. We'll report back.
We'll report back
We'll
once
do
we
some
find out about the
research.
dad, but mom seems cool.
Shout out to the mom.